Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the garden question and answer video that I do on most Sundays. If you want to participate and ask a question, just ask it in the comment section down below the video. Your comment is your question, and I pick from those each week. I try to pick ones that are pretty relevant to whatever's going on. There's always way more questions than I pick for the video. I usually pick 20, 22 a week. Try to answer some that I answer kind of repeatedly because I feel like they're important, and then some that we haven't heard ever before. This past week there'll be 2 conifer videos that have gone up on the channel. The May garden checklist video will have gone up. There's a video from Tom and Ram Giberson's garden that went up earlier in the week on their what amounts to a drainage ditch. The conifer videos have fairly low views, so that one's fairly specialized for people who are interested in conifers. There's a front garden part 1 and the back garden part 2 of all the little dwarf conifers that we have out here in the garden. Not all are dwarf, but most are dwarf or slow growing conifers that we can keep here in the garden for many years. Eventually, most things in this tiny lot in Raleigh are going to outgrow the space at some point. I think maybe you can see Holly back there in the background. My 14-year-old husky mix is wandering about in the background. She's gotten worse about walking through the annual borders and things, so she hasn't been in quite as many videos recently. She's always walked through the beds, but she's generally speaking been fairly gentle with the plants and avoided them. Now she just crushes them and keeps walking. I think maybe she turned 14 and just said, I'm not going to look where I'm going anymore. So I don't know what's going on there, but she hasn't been in quite as much video content recently. There's a watering video that should have gone up on the Learn to Garden video series. Over on my website, that Learn to Garden video series is linked there. There's a $50 off coupon for the next two more weeks below this video for $50 off of that Learn to Garden video series. And again, I put up a watering video. If I haven't, it will be up today as you're watching this over on the Learn to Garden video series. And I send out an email to the folks who have signed up for that when I put up a new video there. There'll be video content all year on that Learn to Garden video series. And so let's get to some questions. Talked enough there. Oh, one other thing real quick. I'm filming this on Friday, and tomorrow morning I'm speaking at Ralston Blooms over at the J.C. Ralston Arboretum. You'll be watching this video on Sunday after that has happened. But if I met any of you at Ralston Blooms, hello. I'm hoping to see a few subscribers show up over at Ralston Blooms tomorrow. We'll see. We'll see how that goes. We've had a lot of rain this week, and I'm hoping to avoid it tomorrow morning during that time. Okay. So somebody was just asking whether or not they can have a bad area in their garden. They planted 3 dogwoods, one of them died. They've replaced that dogwood, and now it's dying. Yeah, there's definitely spaces in this soil pretty radically changes from a very compact, hard clay soil out by the road in the front, and changes a bit as it reaches this back garden. I've amended it a bunch since we've been here, but even before we started, this soil where I'm standing, kind of the middle of the back garden, was in pretty good shape. It had been basically mowed weeds for about 80 years, and those mowed weeds had actually built up a lot of humus and a lot of pretty good soil over that time. And then the back line back there is just pure sand, and I don't know when this originally was built whether or not they had to level that area out, but that wooded space back here behind me is very, very sandy soil. And I've almost lost a few things back there because it just takes more water to keep up with that section. It just constantly stays drier back there. Plus there's tree roots competing with it. So there's a lot of reasons why. And it's also within the realm of possibility. Dogwoods are not the easiest thing in the world. And I don't know what kind of dogwood it was. I don't know where you are. I don't know if cold could have damaged them. But if you're getting just like seedling white dogwoods, they die a lot. And so, I wouldn't necessarily judge something on a native eastern, dogwood. I probably wouldn't judge any space on that. But yes, there can be the possibility that you have very different soil throughout your garden, especially in new construction where they've just moved soil all over the place to try to get as many houses as they can in little flattened out spaces. Okay, somebody's got a roof overhang and they want to plant things underneath it. They did not give me the zone they're in, but they said they currently have a camellia there, so I'm guessing they're in zone 7, 8, or 9, because that's where most camellias grow. There are a few zone 6 camellias, but for the most part, I'm guessing they're in 7, 8, or 9, and want to replace it. So if you have that roof overhang thing, that's a space where I'm probably going to run drip irrigation. And then you can pretty much grow anything you want. But I've landscaped a bunch of those spaces, and there's a house in my neighborhood that I've noticed that, has about a 3-4 foot overhang, and then the plants that are underneath it. You're going to have to use dry shade things, and then you're going to have to, you probably on top of that want to run drip irrigation or put it in your planter somewhere that you need to occasionally check the water under one of those overhangs, because very little is going to grow there. I always come back to this video that I shot with Mark Wethington over at the Ralston about dry shade plants that went up about 2.5 months ago or something like that. That video, I would take a look at that video for things that you can put under there in the south. And you need dry shade things, and you need to occasionally irrigate it regardless, because it's anything under an overhang like that is just, it's going to stay dry unless you get a crazy amount of rain that runs off the edge and backs up in it a bit. Then it's going to be on the dry side always. Dry shade things, also put irrigation on your calendar somewhere or irrigate it with drip irrigation. Okay, so somebody has hail damage down in Savannah, and it stripped a lot of the leaves off of a lot of their plants. They wanted to know if they should give things some additional fertilizer to help push them and wake them up. No, they'll leaf back out on their own. All those especially established things will very quickly recover from it. I had significant hail damage at the old house not that long before I moved out, and I wasn't able to put that house up for sale when I wanted to, because about the time I was going to start to sell it, that's when the hail happened, and it stripped a lot of the siding. My sun is coming out on me right now. It stripped, it was hail big enough that it broke my vinyl siding on one side of the house, and it beat up some plants pretty good. Good size hail. But the plants that were damaged, other than a couple that were literally cracked because of the weight of the hail, killed them. I mean, just absolutely killed them. Everything else was leafed back out in no time whatsoever. Some of your hosta and things that have completely leafed out at this point may just kind of look tattered this year, unless they put on some additional growth here in the next few weeks. So some things may remain a little bit tattered, but for the most part, they'll come right back out. I wouldn't give them any additional fertilizer in that case. She actually laid down back there. Okay, so somebody asked me the difference between Cryptomeria and Camellia Yellowing, and wanted to just kind of know sunshade on both of them. They had tried both of them, and I don't remember what they said they had lost more of. I will tell you that here in the south, Cryptomeria is a plant it and forget it kind of plant. Where Holly's laying back there, there's a twinkle toes Cryptomeria in that container. Back by the shed, you won't be able to see, there's another little dwarf Cryptomeria, the upright Cryptomeria like Yoshino that get 75 feet tall, and then little ground cover ones, all kinds of different Cryptomeria. I've got one called Limeade out there, lots of different named ones. They're the toughest. Those and junipers are probably our toughest conifers here in the south. You can plant them in the full sun and just kind of walk away from them. And when I talked a lot about in those conifer videos about making sure the roots are shaded on these conifers, Cryptomeria just don't care. You can plant them and move on with your life. All the Camellia varieties we have out here, and it's a lot of them, they have their roots shaded a bit. They don't mind the sunlight here in zone 7B, but they do. They would not like to sit out in a front garden and just have, dark mulch right up to the base of them. I think that would put a hurting on most of them. So most of ours are tucked in little spaces where they've got some ground covers and thing under them. So here in the south, and I don't remember where this person was. Here in the south, I think Cryptomeria are just more overall rugged, planted and forget it kind of plants that you can put in the full sun and not worry about. But a lot of the Camellia we have out here are just such great, interesting plants. Everything from gold mop cypress to boulevard cypress to, little skinny thing I have in this container right here that's only about 3 inches wide that you can learn about in those conifer videos. I got fern spray back in a container on the front of the building back there. Just all over the place, interesting plants that nightlight one in the front garden. Again, go back and watch those conifer videos and you'll see I've got those underplanted with things to make sure the roots are shaded, and the Cryptomeria just don't care. Okay, so somebody's got a plant leafing out right on the top, and it's actually an Oakland Holly. I've got a variegated Oakland Holly over here. I'll actually turn the camera that way real quick. Try to turn you slow so I don't mess this up. Okay, I think right there is where it shows up. Let me walk over to it. So this is a variegated Oakland Holly, and so theirs was damaged. I don't know if it was a green or variegated one, but theirs was damaged, basically defoliated, and now it's leafing back out, but it's almost all the leaves are up here at the top. Should they cut that back? I would just come in here and cut this leader back a couple feet, and that'll force new growth down at the bottom. And then just as it starts to come back out, it might try to put on a couple leaders at that point, and you can just cut those out. Just pick a new leader as it comes back up. But I would definitely slow this top growth down and let it flush back out. But that would definitely be my strategy for fixing that Oakland Holly. And if it's got an established older root system on it, it'll pretty quickly recover and look pretty good, pretty fast. Let's check the light on this thing. Oh my gosh, again, it's the sun is coming out, and it was raining all morning up until now. Still a little overcast, but okay. I've changed the angle some, but it doesn't matter. Okay, so somebody asked if you can still start, how late you can start seeds on perennials. Basically, they've got 4 72 cell trays, and that's where they have their lighting for in the house. They want to just keep starting seed. So they'll start some seeds, let those grow out, get them where they can transplant them in the ground, and then start another batch. How late can they go with that? Through midsummer for sure, and then at some point, I would just start the seeds and then not plant them this year. Just keep them somewhere where you can protect them through the winter time and not put them in the ground until next spring. That's what I would do, not put little teeny tiny perennials maybe after midsummer, but I would definitely start a batch after that and just try to keep them through the winter time. I thought it was going to stay cloudy, but the sun has decided to pay me a visit while I'm trying to shoot this. So somebody asked, I was talking about last week with the cold hardiness zone map does have some problems. One is it can't really tell, it's just measuring average low temperature. And if you're only measuring average low temperature, that doesn't help us understand heat tolerance. It doesn't help us understand the difference in length of day, where somebody in Long Island versus Raleigh, North Carolina that might be in the same zone have very different plants because it's much shorter days up there. That's what I was talking about in that video. And then somebody talked about the sunset heat zone map. And yeah, there is a heat zone map, and I've never done a video on it. I need to. It is great information. But even with the heat zone map, which tells us, it basically measures the amount of heat in any area. So if you had the combination of your horticultural cold zone in combination with what heat zone you're in, if both of those things were on a plant tag, that would definitely help narrow down where that plant actually grows well, and not just all the way throughout zone 7. But it grows mostly in the more hot areas or the more cool areas of zone 7. It would be super helpful. Again, it's not going to then measure the length of day, so there's nothing that would ever get us all the way through to where a plant would absolutely be, 100% reliable in your area. All these tools are is, getting us close. And then, but some are going to require some additional protection based on maybe you're in an open area like Tennessee, whereas you might be on the other side of the Appalachia in Winston-Salem, but have the same zone as you are on the other side, but we don't get as much wind on this side. There's a lot of factors at play beyond how cold it gets and how hot it gets, and the length of day. So these are just tools that get us close, but they can't be perfected really. Okay, so somebody's asking how they can harden off their seedlings when it's cloudy every day. So they started their seedlings in the house or under some light, and then we talk about bringing them out, getting them acclimated. I've got a tray right here. Of course, it's absolutely full of water because it will not stop raining. I'm not complaining about the rain. I do not complain about rain because our reservoirs are full. We're not going to have any water restrictions this summer. I don't have to think about that going forward. But here's, some things we had grown. We've already planted a bunch of it, but we've got several more things in the tray, and we have them out here in the full sun. They wanted to know, how to get them acclimated if it's just cloudy every day. You would be amazed how much sun is actually making it through this cloud deck. You can go to the beach on a cloudy day and absolutely get burned. There's a lot more of the sun's energy is making it through those clouds than you think. So put them out in the cloudy weather and then just go ahead and put them in the ground whenever. They'll be fine. There's not a big giant step between a cloudy day like this where it's coming in and out a bit and full sun. It's still brighter than the lights are where you started the seedlings initially. So don't worry about that one. Don't overthink it too much. Put them out in a few cloudy days and stick them in the ground. They'll be fine. Oh, so I talked about wild violets last week, and of course I called it a weed for me, something I don't want to garden with. And then, of course, I jokingly said, then people will talk about eating them and all kinds of things. Anytime I say something is a weed, then, I always get well, you can eat it. And then several people said they liked their wild violet. So I don't, when I say that it's a weed for me, don't ever think that any opinion that I have should be your opinion as well. I mean, I'm not trying to influence your opinion of something like that. If it's something that you enjoy in your beds and it's something that you feel like you can garden with successfully and they're interesting to you, I don't care what it is, grow the thing. So, certainly don't want anybody to think that, just because I have the opinion of something that I'm trying to influence. No, heck no, man. Do what you want to do in your garden. It's your garden. Enjoy it the way you want to garden. No problem there. Somebody asked me a great question. So they wanted to know some plants that I've sold and grown over this lifetime that it was just a mystery to me why anybody would have wanted them. Okay. And it was a great question. And, there's some plants that I just kind of know come with insect problems, like a golden euonymus is an example of that. They just get euonymus scale out in the landscape, and it's inevitable that they're going to get euonymus scale. It's one of those plants that are sold in the millions every year, and then they are, I don't see that many of them. There was a great one in Ram's garden in that video that I put up the other day, right at the beginning, that big round gold shrub, right when I start talking about the drainage area in her garden. There's a golden euonymus. It's in great shape. Everything in her garden is in great shape. She sprays nothing. But that's a plant that has some stress-related issues, insect-related issues, and I grew them and sold them like crazy, and everybody grows them and sells them like crazy, and there's just not that many in the landscape versus how many are being sold. They are out there. I see them, but they're not nowhere near as many as are being sold. So I knew those things. You're sending things out into the world that, they're getting problems. I mean, there's no question, but it's the plants that people want. They're visually appealing on the tables, and so people are grabbing them. But the ones that but that's not really a fair thing, having some piece of inside knowledge, about that plant. But the ones that were weird to me, right out of the gate, I'd never understood, and it's getting bright again. I think I'm going to go up here on the porch. I never understood Bradford pears right from the beginning. I did not understand. They had the stinkiest flowers. They were brittle right from the beginning. I mean, they were just the most brittle, trees that just fall apart in any storm. And they didn't, they had that perfect lollipop shape. And everybody was like, I love that that perfect lollipop shape. And it just looked so unnatural to me. So for me looking at it, I was like, it looks unnatural. It's got some stinky flowers and it falls apart every time the wind blows, but everybody wanted them. And now, of course, it's become an invasive plant. It's a seriously invasive plant. The Callery pears are just awful everywhere. But that one was one, from 30 years ago that I never understood. And then Ilex crenatas, so any Japanese hollies I sold. And not that Japanese hollies sell, it's the volume or the number of Japanese hollies. I mean, as a percentage of my nursery, it was probably 20% of my nursery between soft touch holly, Hellerai holly, Steeds holly, compacta holly, sky pencil hollies, and others. There's a bunch of Japanese hollies in every shape and size. They look like they're boxwood-like. They're typically less expensive than boxwoods. So people buy them instead of boxwoods to use in their garden. But not that I not that I thought that they were bad plants, it's just like, why is 20% of the volume of my business this weird green ball or weird green thing in different shapes? And we have a couple of them out here. I've got a couple trimmed into topiaries. I've got another one called Red Sky that we're about to put in. It's a sky pencil holly with red new foliage. It's a new plant from the Southern Living Plant Collection. It's definitely a way more interesting, a much more interesting version of Ilex crenata or Japanese holly. But that was always one. And it was just, again, not the plant itself necessarily, but why is it 20% of my business? So somebody asked if they should worry about creeping Jenny, using it as a ground cover, how it's going to negatively affect their other plants. It will not negatively affect your shrubs. So it'll make it to a certain point near your shrubs, and then the shade of the shrubs will kind of prevent it from creeping in. So you'll see that with sedums and, a lot of our aggressive ground covers. They won't crawl, those sun ones, they won't crawl up under the plants necessarily and hurt them. But they were asking about, now I got somebody backing up down the street over here with their backup beeper going off. Somebody has, but this person has hosta, black-eyed Susans, herbaceous perennials. That I would keep the creeping Jenny away from. So frequently talk about keeping the ground covered, using ground covers, planting densely, but creeping Jenny will run through your herbaceous perennials, climb on them, and potentially hurt them. So, keep that in mind. Anything I have in a container with them, it'll try to climb them a bit. And ultimately do damage to it. So it's so aggressive that I wouldn't worry about it with shrubs or woody plants, but I would worry about it if it was climbing through my annual bed or hostas or things like that, because it not necessarily do damage to them, but it has the possibility of doing damage to them. It's so aggressive, especially here during the spring and early summer. And then the next question is a little bit similar. They said their shrubs are I talk about, again, planting very dense so that the plants are shading their shrubs and that kind of thing. And this person has got the shrubs really close together. And I have pointed out that the shrubs out here do have some space around them. It's the herbaceous perennials, the things that go to sleep and wake up, or it's annuals. It's things that can be temporary, that are the fillers in between them. So, keep in mind that I am putting the shrubs some distance apart from one another. There's a few things in here that are crowded that are going to need to be moved around, but when you're planting your garden, I would go ahead and put the shrubs, if they say 3 to 4 feet on the tag or maintainable I'd put them at least 2.5 feet apart and, upwards of 3.5 feet apart, and then I'd tuck, some sort of perennial or annual up in between them. That's how I'm actually keeping the roots cool with those types of plants: ground covers, herbaceous perennials, annuals, maybe super small growing shrubs that will, you could take something like a juniper and plant it up in there, and the juniper will just go in the future where it can go out into the sun, even if the other shrubs invade it a bit. It's able to creep out into the sun and it'll still be fine. So I am thinking through that. Be careful with the shrub placement being too close together, because those you will have to later go and move about potentially. Sometimes you can just limb them up. Sometimes you can just take one of 3 out and that'll be totally adequate, and you can just move it somewhere else. And we've got a couple of those things that are going to have to be moved around. We've planted this place so thick. Okay, so somebody asked about direct seeding in mulch and how successful you are there. If you're doing direct seeding perennials and annuals, those aren't areas I actually mulch in the traditional sense. I am mulching them. Anything you're covering the ground with would technically be mulch. But I'm not using hardwood mulch in areas where I have annual or perennial or, annual seedlings. So if I have, let's say I was throwing out sunflowers and having those come up, I'm not going to mulch that space. Even after they germinate, I'm not going to mulch that space. The mulch can potentially have a negative impact on some of those seasonal plants while it's in the process of breaking down. And so, if you go to a big sunflower display planting somewhere, they're just planting, in the bare dirt. They're getting all the weeds out, and then they're just planting in the bare dirt. For us, we use compost in those spaces as mulch. So our beds, we put up a video about bed prep for annuals not that long ago. You can go back and look at that, and it's literally just clean the weeds out, break up the subsoil a bit with a shovel, and then spread compost on top of it. And then you could direct seed directly into that type of bed. And easy peasy. You know, the things come up. You may get a few more weeds in a compost mulch rather than a hardwood type mulch or pine straw or wood chips or something like that, but your annuals, plants, your seedlings will perform much better. If they're perennial seedlings and you're direct seeding them, when they go back to sleep in the fall, you could definitely mulch them at that time. They'll be fine, you know, in the future. Okay. All right, so somebody asked the difference between potting soil and potting mix. And those two terms actually get used interchangeably. So there might not be any difference in them, but what it should be is potting soil could include soil or not. So native, you know, soil from the ground in some way or another. So things like garden soil would be some sort of organic material like compost blended with some sort of topsoil. That would be garden soil in my mind. Topsoil would just be the scraped off top layer of soil. You know, that would be in a bag. And so then potting soil could include some of those soil products and then other organic things. Potting mix is definitely going to be free of any any soil, and so typically will be sterile. And so if you need to start seeds under a light or something like that, and you need a sterile media, potting mix is what you want to use. But then I find, again, those words get mixed up and interchanged a bit. But if it has soil in the name, it potentially has some sort of soil in it. And if you're starting seeds and you want some sort of sterile media, I would go with a potting mix. Now, a potting mix could then be made up of peat moss, coconut coir, compost, bat guano, manures of other types, that kind of thing. Poultry litter could be part of it. It could be all kinds of things that are the organic base for it. And then you would have some sort of thing to lighten it up or loosen it up. That could be perlite or vermiculite, some sort of exploded stone or something like that that has a lot of air in it, so that the material has air throughout the layer, you know, that you're using it. If you're using it in a container or starting seeds in it, that kind of thing. The other thing that all of them might contain is fertilizer, and I do not want fertilizer to come in my potting mix, potting soil, topsoil, or garden soil. Don't want fertilizer in it, because for two reasons. Number one, if it's been in that bag for a long time, if it's, let's say it's some sort of slow release fertilizer, it's supposed to last over some period of time. If it's been in that bag for a long time and it's been out on a parking lot and it's been in a bunch of heat, I'm always worried that fertilizer could be ready to release all at once. So what would have been a 3-month fertilization becomes a 1-week fertilization, and your plants burn from it. Also, not necessarily the time of year to have fertilizer in your potting mix soil, garden soil, topsoil. You know, if you're planting things in the fall, you probably wouldn't want some, you know, non-organic, synthetic fertilizer pushing your plants all winter long in that mix. So I want fertilizer free, and then I'll decide on whether or not I mind if there's actually soil in it. So something for a container outside, I don't care. You know, so I'll use a potting soil or a garden soil for that, no problem. If I'm seed starting and I need a sterile environment, I would definitely use a potting mix or something that definitely doesn't have any soil in it, because I don't want to introduce any potential pathogen, you know, that could come from a soil, from having soil in the bag. That's enough of that. Okay, let's see. So somebody, they answered their own question, but their Stellar Ruby Magnolia had yellowish flowers, and mine is in full bloom right there behind me, and it's got the burgundy kind of wine-colored flowers that they're supposed to have. And then he called the company, and they had sent him the wrong one. I was going to actually ask if it was serendipity that they had sent him, but they had sent him the regular banana shrub, so he got an answer to that, which makes a lot more sense because they are supposed to be darker flowers. Somebody's hostas are slow to wake up. Mine were, interestingly, and we have a lot of hosta in this garden. I could do a video after video on hostas out here. We have so many in this collection now that it's kind of amazing, but some of them came super early and just right on time, regular. The leaves are already fully extended, and then we have a few here that I honestly thought were dead. I mean, I had no idea why they were coming up so much slower than the others, but now they've responded and they're up. They're not as full as the ones that came up earlier, but by mid-May, it will look like nothing had happened. And I'm guessing it's just cooler in those spots. If you have more shade in that area, potentially the sun is not hitting the soil and warming it up as much. And so they're mostly on the back line back there, which tends to be stressful. Again, I said it earlier in the video, it tends to be stressful on plants out here anyway. And it may be that the soil was just cooler longer. But yeah, we've had a few perennials still waking up a little later than usual, which I'm glad to see them, because I thought I had more dead than we actually do. Somebody wanted to know when they should put edamame seeds in their containers. Now, they were in my zone, so as soon as your kind of average last frost date's over, and you can look at your weather app that you use and see that the next 10 days are also not going to have a frost, you can seed those. Any of your summer things you can definitely be seeding at this point in my area, because we're April 15th is kind of our average last frost date, and then I look way out, and so as I'm shooting this on the 28th or 27th, 28th of April, something like that, I'm 12 days past my average last frost date, and I'm still looking at it, because we've had freezes, not just frost, but freezes in below 30 type freezes in early May in the past. Okay, let's see. So somebody has their Camellia is yellowing. They think it's diseased and wanted to know if they should remove it. The thing with Camellia's yellowing, and it's more in Camellia japonicas probably than Camellia sasanquas, you can get, you can have alkaline soil, where your pH is so high and that they can't bring up iron. You can have poor drainage. You can be over fertilizing them. You can be underwatering them. There's a lot of reasons you can end up with yellow leaves. And then there's the worst case, which is Phytophthora root rot, which does yellow the leaves. Occasionally one survives it, but a lot of times they do die if they get Phytophthora root rot, which is again though, that yellowing is, there's a lot of different reasons you get yellowing in camellias, and so you're not alone. And scale insects, you get scale, tea scale. Camellias are in the tea family. Tea that you drink is Camellia sinensis. It's a Chinese camellia, but they all get tea scale, which is an insect that gets on them, and it can look like mottling on the top of the leaf. So you can look under the leaf and see if you have tea scale. But again, there's a lot of reasons, Phytophthora being the worst case scenario. You'll know because the plant will likely just die at some point, even if it's got new growth on it now. Sometimes things can die. So I've seen, as an example, like an azalea die, but be in full bloom in the spring. So it had the energy up in the bud, and it had some energy left in the plant, and it tries to produce seed one last time on the way out. And so sometimes you'll see a plant grow, put out some initial growth, initial flowers in the spring, even though it's on the way out. It just had some reserve energy. Okay, so somebody asked about hedging their sunshine ligustrum, into little boxwood-like plants. You can absolutely cut those things into any shape or size that you want to keep them. I wouldn't take very large ones and cut them down to that size, because they're going to be very woody and they may look a little weird. But if you're buying new ones and you could find them in gallon containers, you can let them get up 2 or 3 feet and just keep them there and just keep hedging across the top of them for as long as you want. Again, it's be difficult to take one that's already 6 or 8 feet tall and cut it down to that size and not have it look awkward for a long period of time while it recovered from that. But if you started with small ones, you could keep them like that. Okay. Last one for this week. Somebody asked, where would I move if I left North Carolina? This is actually kind of a funny story. I plan on saying this at the Ralston tomorrow morning. Again, that will be yesterday as you guys are watching this. It's kind of a funny thing about leaving North Carolina for me. I am 6th generation North Carolinian. My son who's 25 and is living in Germany right now. He's 7th generation North Carolinian. And we have, we came from Europe, got off a boat and said, that's it, no more traveling. We don't want to see the rest of the country, we're good. And so we've been here the whole time. So we've been thinking about leaving North Carolina is it's not something that happens in my family since we left, my father's side of my family left Europe. So it's kind of funny. I would definitely want to stick in the southeast somewhere. I like the normal rainfall amounts. As you get down toward the Gulf, it's a bit steamy. It's a bit hot down there. But I do like this band kind of right up under, I would say, northern Alabama, over to North Georgia, under the Appalachian Mountains, and then turning up through western South Carolina and western North Carolina to central North Carolina, and then up into Virginia. I love this little band. It allows us to grow really a lot of different plants and experiment with things that aren't it's supposed to be too hot for, and experiment with things it's supposed to be too cold for. And so probably somewhere in North Georgia or North Alabama, something like that. But I definitely wouldn't want to leave an area that didn't have regular rainfall, meaning that we could get rain 12 months out of the year. I wouldn't want to go to a place that was cloudy all the time, although I love cloudy, rainy days. We had one, half this day it's gotten very cloudy since I came in here, by the way. It's been 100% cloudy. But I wouldn't, and then I wouldn't want to be in like some kind of Chicago cold. That type of cold would just be too cold. Having grown up down here. I wouldn't pick an area that's very dissimilar to where I'm at right now, just because I do feel like we're in kind of the sweet spot where we can experiment a lot in gardening and in horticulture. So thank you guys very much for watching and following along with the channel. I will be back with one of these next Sunday. You can ask gardening questions down below this video, and I'll see you later.